one of the things that I think would be cool too is like, let's say this is Darth Plagueis and they have some sort of resolution at the end of the scene. Like you've got a young actor there to work with.
True.
And we've seen recasting work in Star Wars, particularly with like Han Solo, for instance. So like, what if they just recasted a young Palpatine and they fast forwarded and then they did a show centered around Qimir and Palpatine and like them raising him,
politics
and Naboo and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of really cool stuff that they could do with this. And like, this is the kind of thing that I think is great, because what it is it's the biggest and most important thing happening in Star Wars, which is not The Mandalorian, which is not Boba Fett, which is not like, even when you're watching Ahsoka, you're like, none of this matters because Palpatine's out in Exegol with 1,000 Star Destroyers that all are Death Stars.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You know, so like this to me is like new Star Wars that has the weight of the old Star Wars, because it's the most important thing happening in the universe at that time.
And I'm down for that. And again, like I'm totally enjoying this story. Like, and so much so that the book that you and I love, we're okay with it being almost like a relic. Hate to say it, but like it kind of is turning into a relic slowly. Like, you know, and again though, it is Legends, and that's what we have to take it for, right?
No, it is what it is. Like I'm surprisingly okay with it.
Yeah.
Like there were some people in the comments talking about Qimir being Plagueis, and like I didn't know if that was just people pontificating or if like they had read leaks or whatever. But like I'd already kind of started to mentally prepare myself for that.
Yeah,
makes some sense too. Like it's just really difficult to like have Immune
be
live action.
Yeah, that was one of the comments. Like how would you manipulate Immune talking and stuff and making it look good? Like that would be really difficult.
The hard part is like Darth Plagueis in the book as Immune was one of the greatest financiers in the galaxy, and that was kind of an important element to like how he manipulated things, but that could be worked around by just him having Immune under his thumb that he manipulates in all of these situations.
Oh,
and so I think they can work it out, but like I think the Sith Grand Plan is one of the coolest and most well executed story pieces in like the history of cinema.
Agreed.
And it comes together beautifully in Revenge of the Sith at the end of that movie. And like doing a prequel where they lay all that out works in the same way that the prequel trilogy worked to set up the actual original Star Wars trilogy. And I just would be really down for them to kind of like continue to flesh out that character.
I have a take on Qimir and how he's treated the sisters, because it seems like he's being very gentle with Osha, and obviously he's trying to manipulate her, right? But in contrast, May was so fearful of him. And it seems that he's completely playing his cards in a different way with the twins. What do you think about that?
I think so too. But I mean, he straight up said that. He's like, I made a mistake with May. But I think he meant more what he was talking about when he picked her. And I want to get to that in a minute. But like specifically with Osha too, like Osha has a different attitude than May, in the sense that like May is all anger and like just pent up energy, and she just wants revenge. And like Osha is like weirdly righteous at this point, in the sense that like she carries a great deal of loyalty towards the Jedi,
right,
even though there's no real reason for that. And like obviously Qimir tries to pick at that a little bit with some of his words, but I do agree that he's taking a very gentle approach to Osha. But at the same time, like I kind of appreciate that, in the sense that like if you were a Sith and you were going to expose yourself to a young impressionable person,
literally
Jesus, Luke. If you were going to expose yourself as a Sith to a potential apprentice, you would do it in a gentle way to kind of like ease into it.
That's kind of what Palpatine did with Anakin.
Yeah, and
he like slowly sowed seeds. Yep. Yeah. So it makes sense.
And one of the things too, if you remember the initial conversations that that Palpatine and Anakin had, it was like, from a certain point of view, is what Palpatine says
it's all
when he
semantics.
talks about good. It's like this battle of like, well, right and wrong are kind of like what the Jedi tell you is right and wrong. It's like the same thing with Plagueis and Palpatine. Like Palpatine, Plagueis actually says to Palpatine says to Plagueis, like, aren't the Sith evil? When they're sitting down, and obviously at this point, Palpatine is some like 13-year-old boy who just murdered his family, right? and Plagueis like says to him, like he like literally laughs. There's Warriors are making a trade, but it's not big enough for me to work. So that's good. Anyway, it's one of those things where Palpatine or Plagueis actually like kind of laughs and goes like, "What does that even mean?" Like, I can't remember the exact words he used, but he almost all the Sith kind of like start by just confronting like the basic issue of morality, which is like. That and again, we're not talking about that in the real world. We're talking about the Star Wars world.
Right.
Like, it makes sense in terms of his manipulations to be like, I am not actually evil. I'm just a person with a different interpretation of the Force.
Right.
Like, and if you kind of focus on that, you might be able to kind of ensnare somebody in your web, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's always like an underlying theme of the Sith. Like when Plagueis is teaching Palpatine about the Sith ways that's what he was talking about. He was like, yeah, there might be millions of lives that get lost for our cause, but overall we're like ridding the galaxy of weakness essentially, which and then they spin it into like, oh, we're doing some righteous thing and everyone should thank us for this.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
It's all very interesting, but you understand their take. You really do.
There's a line from Plagueis to Palpatine to Plagueis when Palpatine kind of conceptualizes the idea of Order 66, where he says like the Jedi must be viewed as the enemies of peace and justice in the Republic, not the protectors. And then there's a really cool moment where Plagueis is like, say that again,
right?
You know, and then they like kind of start to put together a plan, because originally like Plagueis wanted to use the cloners on Kamino to create an army to fight against the Jedi.
Right.
But then he was like, no. What if we could ensnare them in a war where they are fighting alongside the Jedi? And like that was kind of where things turned. But again, like it's all about the narrative and controlling the narrative. And Palpatine, after he becomes the Emperor, does an amazing job controlling the narrative. We see that in Bad Batch. We see that in Rebels. Like it's a consistent thing. Like it's like, I'm this sweet old man who just was attacked by the Jedi. You know?
They talk about giving each Jedi their own personal assassin, which are the clones.
Yeah.
Which is such a cool way to think of the clones. But you know, now that we're talking about it, it made so much sense in the Plagueis book.
Yeah,
how they could finance all of that on Kamino, and at this time in Star Wars, the Kaminoans need to be working, essentially. So like how Star Wars,
not necessarily, it's 100 years.
100, okay, yeah. And about,
but
so
like,
then what, 50 years out?
I think
70 years from now or something like that. Yeah, so actually we do have some time. You're right.
I think 20 years before the Phantom Menace in the Plagueis book is when Plagueis asks the Kaminoans to update their cloning facilities because they aren't up to par.
I see.
And then 10 years before, I think they actually place the order during the Phantom, like during that same time period, because then they grow over the course of the 10
that's
years.
a good point. So we do have some time. We actually have a few decades to play with there. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Dude, that's why we do the show live, Jay.
Exactly. We just work through it. So the conversation between Qimir and Osha surrounding why May was the wrong choice, I thought was fascinating.
Yeah.
So what I thought about, so basically what he says to Osha is like, I made a mistake with your sister because I thought she wanted more than just revenge. I thought she wanted what I want, but she actually just wanted revenge. And he didn't actually kind of elaborate on that yet, and I'm hoping that he will.
Well, and that does kind of explain why all of a sudden May would just switch sides, because she's like, oh, my sister's not dead.
Yeah,
and then she's like, oh, maybe the Jedi aren't that bad.
Yeah. And I don't even know what May's whole thing is, because then she like tried to kill Sol, but then like backed out, and then she was like going to use the comm to like ask for help. Like none of that makes any sense to me.
Some people said that might just be bad writing, and it could be. It very well could be. Yeah.
I'm not really. I'm trying to keep an open mind.
Like, what was her like side. Again? And like the big question is, what was May's end game? Okay, so she gets on a ship with Sol. Now what?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like, what are we doing?
Yeah, and we talked about that yesterday. Like, what are you going to do? Go back to the Sith? He wants to kill you.
Right.
You know, like it didn't make any sense.
Especially when you leave your sister. Like you left your sister. So again, yeah, I'm kind of confused on that for sure.
The interesting thing that I thought about when I heard that line from Qimir was in the third Bane book, when Darth Zana meets the Dark Jedi who's fallen and is like chasing Sith trinkets. His name was Set Hearth, I think.
Yeah.
So like, you know, essentially it's this really funny scene where Set is on Nal Hutta partying, and he like comes home in the middle of the night and like falls down on his couch with like a bottle of wine and like fakes that he's asleep, and he senses a presence in his house. But like Xana like is in the house, Darth Zana, who's the apprentice of Darth Bane at this point, and she like jumps down from the rafters and lands behind the couch, and then he like kind of like plays it cool and is like, oh, like, you know, did you follow me home or something like that? And then like he sneak attacks her, and then she like completely obliterates him, like just like toys with him. Like she specifically says like, I need to humiliate him so bad that he realizes I have something to teach him. And so she humiliates him badly. Then at the last minute, she gives him Sith sorcery. So he like descends into madness and he barely crawls out of it like days later.
Yeah, that was his test.
Yeah,
if he could crawl out of it, then he was worthy.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they start talking, and essentially like Xana picks up pretty quickly like, he might be agreeing to be my apprentice just because he knows I'll kill him if he says no.
Yeah.
And one of the things that she talks about, and it's really the whole premise of the book, because Bane's mad at Xana for not challenging him either, but like a quintessential trait of a Sith Lord is ambition.
True.
They have to want it all. If you don't, like the Dark Jedi, they typically just use their power for wealth and personal, just in very selfish ways.
Right.
And they really don't care. That's what Setharth is. Setharth is like your textbook Dark Jedi, so to speak. But then like the Sith are supposed to have a certain amount of ambition. Like, and essentially what Qimir is saying is like, May wanted to kill these other 4 Jedi, but she clearly had no interest in the type of galactic ambition that Darth Plagueis / Qimir has.
Right. Yeah. What a Sith would want.
Yeah. What an actual Sith would want.
Yeah, I totally agree.